Hi guys, so I'm out on a field trip with my daughter's preschool class today, so I'm not going to be with you. I'm making this video to kind of help explain the big question essay to you. So you're going to hear me say big question and essential question a lot. They're interchangeable, so it's the same thing. The idea is that you are going to write an essay that answers some big question that doesn't have like one specific correct answer. So the first thing I want you to look at is on Google Classroom. I have listed a bunch of the resources for the big question. So you can open up the EQ essay prompt handout, and it explains the prompt, which is in a well-developed 5-paragraph essay, discuss the answer to your essential question using 3 artifacts as evidence. So just like you just looked at 3 different types of texts that had sort of the same idea, which is the loss of innocence, you're going to find 3 different texts of your own that would answer your question, and you're going to write a sample, or you're going to write an essay answering that question. So in that folder, there's also a model big question essay written by awesome student. So take a few minutes right now. You can pause the video and read that essay. Okay, so hopefully you read the essay, and that gives you an idea of what sort of thing we're looking for when you guys work on your big question essay. This essay is part of the honors assessment. It's something that all of the honors students across the county essentially do. So, yeah. The next thing I want to point out is let's talk about picking your big question. So the next resource that I want you to open is the link that says it's essential questions by unit list. So there you'll see we've got questions like what causes the loss of innocence, and what does coming of age mean, and what is the importance of empathy and tolerance. And then it has a bunch of other questions. All of these questions we've kind of talked about thematically throughout the year. The first couple of questions about coming of age and loss of innocence we talked about with our short story unit. The questions about empathy and tolerance and courage and heroism and stereotyping we talked about with To Kill a Mockingbird. A positive personality trait becoming a tragic flaw, and journey versus a quest. We touched on those ideas when we read The Odyssey. This quarter, we're going to talk about what's most important in life and to what degree does an individual change society. In Romeo and Juliet, we looked at what are the characteristics of love, how do external forces shape or change an individual, and what's stronger fate or free will. And then at the end of this quarter, we'll talk about poetry and sort of the value of poetry and other art. So what I want you guys to do now is you can do it on the back of the handout that explains the essay, or you can get another piece of scrap paper. But I want you to take 5 to 10 minutes, and I want you to look at that list of questions and think what 2 or 3 questions kind of stand out to you the most. And then I want you to just write about them. And this can be, I don't care if it's webbing or bullets, no one's going to look at this but you. But this is going to help you kind of narrow down which question you like the most and which question you think that you'll be most interested in and be able to write the best essay about. So again, you could try writing an answer to these questions. You could talk about whether or not these are good questions, but I want you to write for about 5 or 10 minutes. And at the end of that, it's likely that one of these questions will jump out at you and be the question that you decide to write about. So go ahead and pause this video, take your 5 to 10 minutes and do that. And once you've settled on a question, you can turn the video back on and I'll talk to you about how to pick your artifacts or the different texts that you'll look at. Okay, so now that you have your question, the next resource I want you to look at is called Guidelines for Artifacts. Now, on this handout, it's going to talk about like something, gathering these that to put in your Google Drive or to add to your portfolio. You don't need to worry about that. It used to be that we would introduce this essay in the fall and then every month have you guys find separate or new texts that relate to your big question throughout the entire year. And then in April we'd have you pick your top 3, but we decided that's just silly to make you do all of that work. So, but I just forgot to change the handout before I posted it. So here are, you can read the handout. It'll explain everything to you, but your possible materials could be a poem. You want this to be a published work. You don't want it to be from, like, Mrs. Hansen's 6th grade English class or something like that. You want it to be a published poem. You could do an article from a newspaper or a magazine. Again, you want to make sure that whatever source you get any news articles from, that it's a legitimate source and it's not just like some dude hanging out in his mom's basement writing up conspiracy theories and calling it news. We want to say no fake news for this one, just real legitimate news. You could write about art or a photograph, sculpture, painting, comics, anything like that. A scene from a TV show or a movie, an independent novel, but you cannot pick a book that we've already read. So you can't use To Kill a Mockingbird or Romeo and Juliet. You can't use any of the short stories that we've read. You could use your IRP book, that would be fine, but just not any of the texts that we've read as a class. You could do song lyrics, you could do a famous speech by a historical figure. If you could interview a family member or a friend, but if you do choose to do the interview, you are going to have to type up a transcript of the interview, so that may be a deterrent for some of you. These are not the only options, but this is a pretty broad list for you to start with. So the whole idea of this is that this is a question that you'll be kind of interested in, and you sort of follow that curiosity and you think about like where you could look to find answers to this question, and throughout your research you would be able to come across something and be like, oh wow, that sort of influences how I think about my question, or no, that makes me change my mind. That's sort of the spirit of this activity, of this essay, instead of saying like, well, this is the one right answer and I know exactly what sources I'm going to use and I don't want to change my mind whatsoever because it's set in stone. That's not really the spirit of it. So ideally you guys will take some time and like thoughtfully look for some artifacts that can help you answer whatever question that you chose. So, and if you scroll down to the second page, it talks about like a couple of suggestions on where you can go for poetry or newspapers, and then it gets into works cited. You are going to have to create a works cited page for this essay, and there is a template for almost any kind of source that you could potentially want to use, or any kind of artifact listed in this document, but you're also welcome to use online things like EasyBib.com or Citation Machine. I prefer EasyBib. I think it's better than Citation Machine, but it's whatever you want. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. We're going to be working on the big question essay for a while. In fact, the only homework that you have is regarding this essay at this point is to try and find one source that you want to bring in for class on Friday. You don't have to write about it. You just have to find some artifact that you think relates to whatever big question or helps you answer the big question that you've chosen. And then in class, we'll talk about how to write about the artifacts, and yeah, we'll go from there. And so the next 3 classes, you're going to bring in a new artifact for the next 3 classes, and I'll give you some time in class to work on writing about them. And then the draft of your essay isn't actually due for like 2 weeks. So you'll see it's not going to be that painful because we're going to do a fair amount of it in class. And that's sort of the gist of it. Of course, when I'm there, I can answer all the questions that you guys have. So hopefully this made sense to you. So now that you've finished that, we're going to kind of switch gears. And you guys are going to get a packet that's an introduction to Tuesdays with Maury. And that there's a copy of the handout on Google Classroom. It's under the announcement that says Tuesdays with Maury information. So you're going to get 2 handouts. One is the background of the book, and then it's going to explain your first assignment, which is called the Teacher Tribute, which that is on Google Classroom. So you'll read the Tuesdays with Maury introduction packet, and that'll kind of show you some samples of a teacher tribute, and then your homework is to write one of your own, and there's a copy of the rubric in the handout. You're also going to get an annotation chart. You're going to want to hang on to that. So with this book, you are going to annotate, but you're not annotating for literary devices. You're annotating more for life lessons. And I can explain more about this on Friday when I'm in class. But the first 48 pages of the book are due on Tuesday. So if you're not going to be able to get a copy before the weekend, let me know and I can try and get a copy for you. I don't have enough of the books to give everybody a copy, but I do have some books. But hang on to that annotation chart. When you guys take your test, at the end of your test, you're going to turn in your book because it'll have all your annotations in it, and you're going to turn in the annotation chart. The annotations in your book are worth up to 30 points, and that just chart that you fill in with different lessons that Maury teaches throughout the book is worth 10 points. So they're easy points that you don't want to throw away. And your test is open book, and you get to use that chart, so it's definitely worth making sure that you're keeping up with that. So that's about it. Just read the Tuesdays with Maury introduction packet, and then if you have time, you can work on your teacher tribute, and that is due on Friday. So your homework that you want to have with you when you walk into class Friday is your teacher tribute turned in on Google Classroom and the first artifact to help you answer your big question. All right, I hope you guys have a great Wednesday, and I will see you on Friday.